Hi guys, my name is Aisling Walsh and today we're going to be discussing topics which you might expect to see on your Leaving Cert German paper in June. I achieved a H1 in Leaving Cert German and being aware of topics that were predicted to be important for my paper definitely helped with that, so keep watching to find out which topics might be important for your paper in June. Alongside my helpful tips and predictions, I'm also going to be mentioning loads of resources throughout this video which will help you learn some of those key topics. So be sure to like this video so you can save it for yourself in the future and find all of those resources down in the description below more easily. Just a disclaimer before we jump in, Leaving Cert predictions can be a great way to figure out what you might want to spend a little bit of extra time on or study in greater depth, but I would never advise that you study only the predicted topics. The Leaving Cert paper can be unpredictable and is influenced by a number of different factors, so first I would advise that you cover all of the basics in all of your topics, and then if you have a little bit of extra time and want to return to these topics, you can. And finally, this is an educated opinion. I'm not the SEC, so your guess is as good as mine as to what will be on the paper in June, but with that being said, let's get straight into it. So firstly, I'm going to run you through my advice on some common grammar questions which feature on the German paper. And to start us off, we're going to talk about tenses. Questions on the tenses are very common on the German paper. They've come up 5 times in the past 9 years, so you need to be comfortable with both recognizing and using the different tenses. You need to be familiar with the present, the perfect, and the imperfect tense, as these are tested quite often in both the written and the oral exam. The narrative piece is usually in the imperfect tense, and you'll be asked questions in the oral in the perfect tense. So regardless of whether or not they feature as a dedicated grammar question on the paper, you need to know them. For example, you might be asked a question such as "Was haben Sie am Wochenende gemacht?" and you should practice writing down sentences and verbally practice your sentences around answering these questions to really nail down the different tenses. Next, we're going to talk about adjective endings. These haven't featured on the paper since 2019, so while they are a little bit tricky and you might want to avoid them, they are due on the paper unfortunately, so it's worth your time to brush up on your notes on adjective endings. Remember, when in doubt, adding an en at the end is usually a safe bet, as this is the change in the majority of the cases. The next topic which you might see on the paper is relative pronouns. These haven't featured on the paper since 2021 and commonly come up in the Angewandte Grammatik section, so it's important that you know them. With these, you want to take your time. The most important thing is that you're able to recognize the different cases that you're dealing with. For example, let's take the sentence "Das Kind mit dem gespielt habe ist krank." I played with the child, so it becomes the dative in the relative clause. Generally, you just have to identify and say what case the noun is in this exercise. If you're having trouble identifying the prepositions in the sentences here, you can look at the video notes tab on Studyclix for the grammar section on the German paper, and it has lots of resources linked which can help you with this. There's a couple of songs linked on there, I think, which I actually used to help me remember which prepositions fell into which case for my Leaving Cert German paper. And I remember sitting in the German paper and just having these songs play over and over again in my head, but they're catchy and they work, so you should check them out. Finally, let's tackle the substantives. These were featured in the paper last year, but they're super common and come up frequently, so it's still important that you're able to wrap your head around them. For a grammar section question, it's usually a case of identifying whether the noun is masculine, feminine, or neuter and what case it's in. Understanding these elements will help you breeze through the grammar section in the paper. Even if they don't feature on the paper in a dedicated grammar question, you still need to be able to use the different articles in your written piece and in your oral exam, so they're super important. To help you figure out the articles generally, who's doing the action is the nominative, who is receiving the action falls under the accusative, the indirect object is in the dative, and ownership is genitive. For example, if we take the sentence "Der Mann gibt dem Kind seiner Tochter einen Fußball."
The man, who is the nominative, gives a football, which is the accusative, to the child, the dative, because it's the indirect object, of his daughter, which is in the genitive case.
So that sentence can kind of help you wrap your mind around the different articles. To help you revise for the grammar sections and get yourself prepared in the best way possible, check out our notes on the Studyclix website on topics such as the past tense and the definite article. And once you've learned those notes, you can test yourselves with our quizzes for grammar. That's our tips on the grammar section for today. Remember to practice, 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 and you'll be comfortable with German grammar in no time. Next, we're going to move on to topics which you might see featured on the German paper in June. Now, you should remember that for the topics, usually all you need is one paragraph of well-researched, correct German. For the oral exam, you should be prepared to answer a few questions on each topic, and for the written exam, usually one solid paragraph is enough to allow you to move on to the next topic. So you should have about 10 sentences prepared for each topic. So now let's talk about some common topics which frequently appear on the German paper. First is the environment, or the Umwelt. This is a reoccurring theme which will appear on the paper in some shape or form every year. Last year, the journalistic piece was heavily based on this topic, and it can come up in multiple different areas on the paper, in the listening, in the written exam, and even in the oral. Remember, there's the Bildungsgeschichte, mehr Windkraft, ja oder nein. So you need to be able to not only write about this topic, but to speak about it as well. The next topic, which is really important, is the media, or the Medien. This has become more common in recent years and has featured 8 times on the paper in the last decade alone. So it's clearly a very important topic. This covers everything from how much time you spend on your phone, to using computers in the classroom, to social media influencers, and even how technology is impacting young people. So it's quite an expansive and extensive topic, and you need to know it in depth. So if you study handy mobbing, this can help you get prepared for this topic, and particularly get you prepared for questions around bullying and social media, and the effect on young people and that social media might have. On that point, Studyclix has made resources for all of the role plays and picture stories for German. So if you want to check them out on the Studyclix website to start preparing for your oral exam, or even just to kind of skim through them and pick out keywords to use and to learn for your written exam, that would be a good idea. The next topic, which is really important, is Ausland, or living abroad, given that we're studying a foreign language, and along with questions on learning a language and the advantages of doing such, it has come up quite frequently. So you need to be prepared to answer questions on why you chose German, the differences between Germany and Ireland, particularly in schools, and most importantly, be ready to talk about your experiences and preferences with studying, living, and traveling abroad. One of the last topics, which is quite common on the paper, is Gesundheit, and this actually features quite commonly in the listening. It can come up in the context of accidents. So to answer a question on this topic, it's great to have a few sentences about how you keep healthy in your back pocket, and this is a great opportunity to show off to an examiner your modal verbs. So man muss or man soll, one must or one should, blah, 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 to keep healthy. And they can be quite simple sentences, but just being able to show off that you understand how to use the modal verbs will score you a couple of extra marks. Finally, the themes of Schule and Berufspläne tend to feature on the paper quite often, but there's definitely an overlap here with questions which you should have prepared for your oral exam. So you can recycle that information, be a little bit strategic, come up with answers that will work for both the oral and a written paper, just to reduce your workload a little bit. If you want some inspiration for preparing your own answers on these topics, check out our sample answers for the Ausführung zum Thema section of the paper, and our vocab sheets for topics like die Umwelt and Sprachenlernen. Now, here's an exclusive tip directly from an examiner. Keep it so simple, or KISS. Examiners appreciate clear and concise German, so avoid complicated sentence structures. Stick to simple and correct German, and you can recycle phrases and vocabulary that you've learned for your oral exam. In my personal experience, having a simple but correct sentence will gain you more marks and get you a lot further than having a sentence where you're kind of trying to show off and use a complicated sentence structure, but you do it incorrectly or there's a mistake in it. Finally, remember, examiners are strict about 2 things: word order and tenses. This is where most marks are lost. So make sure you pay close attention to them, and make sure you really understand the basics of grammar before you go trying to spend on your time focusing on predictions. Once again, please remember that these are predictions and they're not facts, so don't rely too heavily on them. But that's all the tips I have for you today. Remember to study smart and focus on topics that affect young people. And if you're looking for more predictions, make sure to subscribe, because we're going to have more prediction videos for the Leaving Cert topics coming in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned. Cheers!